All right, let's jump right into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a look at a genuinely intense and provocative framework. We are going to impartially unpack author Karaman Nayak's sweeping thesis on systemic oppression, historical narratives, and his radical vision for what he calls a true sociopolitical revolution. Nayak presents a worldview that completely challenges mainstream political narratives at their very core. We aren't taking any sides here. We're simply using his own writings to map out exactly how he sees the world. To make sense of this rather dense framework, here is our roadmap. We'll be moving through 1. The illusion of revolution. 2. Protectors versus predators. 3. The DNA report argument. 4. Modern political decoys. 5. A true system reboot. And finally, 6. The Ugolin digital mission. Let's get started. Section 1. The illusion of revolution, fake versus real. Our explainer kicks off with a very specific and honestly kind of surprising focal point, a viral movement Nayak anticipates around June 4th, 2026. Nayak explicitly warns the youth about this upcoming movement, which he cheekily dubs the Cockroach Junta Party. According to him, this movement, and pretty much any others like it, are completely manufactured illusions. He argues that most of these big political shifts we celebrate as revolutions, well, they're literally just software updates to an ancient system of slavery. In his view, just swapping out one political party for another doesn't actually change the underlying architecture of power. Instead, he's calling for a system reboot. And by that, he means a total, uncompromising dismantling of systemic oppression, poverty, and discrimination right down to the roots. Moving on to Section 2, Protectors versus Predators. Let's look at how Nayak builds this argument by looking backward. He splits historical and mythological figures into two very uncompromising categories. On one side, you have the indigenous people, or Mulnivasi. He sees them as the true protectors of humanity. He represents them with mythological figures like Shambuk, who brought agricultural identity and the incredibly inclusive philosophy of Vadudeva Kutumbakam, the idea that the whole world is one family. But on the exact opposite side, he places who he calls Eurasian predators. For example, he points to the mythological teacher Dronacharya, who demanded the thumb of his student Eklavya. Nayak uses him as the ultimate symbol of fake, oppressive teachers who established rigid hierarchies, casteism, and slavery. And Nayak doesn't just keep this duality trapped in mythology. He maps it straight onto modern history. He argues there is a continuous, unbroken lineage of these predators exploiting the indigenous population. He points fingers at British colonial judges ruling over a captive populace, historical rulers using the jizya tax to build the Taj Mahal, and even modern oligarchs living in billion-dollar mansions like Antilia. He even goes so far as to critique modern welfare. He argues that keeping millions of people dependent on a 5-kilogram grain ration is just the newest method of maintaining a captive, impoverished population, all while the elite pretend to be their saviors. Section 3. The DNA report argument. Now, this is where it gets really fascinating, because Nayak attempts to bridge his interpretation of ancient mythology with modern science. He leans heavily on one specific piece of data, the 2001 Bamshad DNA report. Based on his interpretation of this report, Nayak claims that India's traditional ruling classes and elites actually share Eurasian ancestry. So what does that mean in his framework? Well, he argues this DNA fundamentally links local oppressors directly to Western global oppressors, essentially creating a unified global elite class. In his view, this Eurasian DNA is completely different from the DNA of the indigenous Mulnivasi population. He uses this to back up his claim that the country is still secretly ruled by outsiders operating on a predatory tribal mindset. Okay, Section 4, Modern Political Decoys. So, how does this system allegedly sustain itself today? Let's take a look. The absolute crucial point in Nayak's framework is his concept of safety valves. Nayak looks at major historical shifts not as real freedom, but as engineered decoys. It's like a timeline of fake revolutions. He claims 1947 brought incomplete freedom, literally just transferring power from the British back to this same elite class. He views the massive anti-corruption movements of Anna Hazare and Baba Ramdev as deliberate distractions. The huge political wave of 2014, he sees it in the exact same light. And, bringing us right back to the start, he predicts the 2026 Cockroach Junta Party movement will just be the system's next desperate attempt to co-opt the youth's anger and stop a real uprising. He asserts a really fascinating, albeit cynical rule here. The decoy saves the system. Whenever this systemic oppression is actually threatened by a true awakening, the ruling elite simply slap a new mask on a leader. He calls this the Vishwaguru, or world leader mask. He argues that figures all across the political spectrum, whether we're talking about Gandhi, Narendra Modi, or Rahul Gandhi, are periodically handed this mask. Why? To pacify the masses, brainwash the youth, and make absolutely sure the underlying system of inequality remains entirely untouched. Section 5. A true system reboot. This brings us to the core philosophical remedy proposed by the author. If everything else is just a decoy, what's the actual fix? It's the ultimate question we have to derive from his text. If we accept his premise for a moment, that mainstream political waves, viral social media trends, and even historical independence are all carefully crafted illusions by a global elite, how in the world does Nayak envision we actually break this cycle? What does a real revolution even look like? His answer is the Ulgulan. Now, Ulgulan is a term historically tied to tribal uprisings, and Nayak is using it to describe a massive, uncompromising awakening. He is calling for a grassroots rebellion that flat out refuses to be co-opted by any media-driven political parties. According to Nayak, a true Ulgulan will instantly wipe out poverty and illiteracy because it tears out the very roots of the slave state. He wants to replace it with a fully independent, transparent society that finally balances human needs with the environment. Finally, Section 6, the Ulgulan Digital Mission. Let's see how the author is attempting to mobilize this massive vision into a tangible, real-world movement today. Nayak passionately anchors his entire call to action with a famous phrase that beautifully translates to, "Truth can be troubled but not defeated." He truly believes that despite the overwhelming dominance of what he calls the oppressors' media and all their fabricated political narratives, the ultimate truth of the indigenous struggle is inevitable. Eventually, it's gonna win out. So, to spread this ideological revolution and bypass those mainstream channels he critiques so heavily, Nayak is pushing the Vaicharik Ulgulan mission, an intellectual rebellion. He's actually put together a massive collection of 18 digital books and audiobooks. And to make sure this knowledge actually reaches the grassroots level, he's priced them to be super accessible. The Hindi ebooks and audiobooks are available for literally just 10 rupees, while the English versions are priced at only 90 rupees. For anyone who has heard his thesis today and wants to join what he calls his quest for truth, Nayak has set up these direct digital avenues. He's encouraging folks to visit his Instamojo Store to download the books, engage with him directly on Twitter @KarmaNayak, or even support the mission financially via UPI. He is completely focused on a decentralized digital mobilization to wake people up to this system reboot he believes we so desperately need. As you reflect on Nayak's incredibly intense historical critique, his views on DNA, and his total rejection of mainstream political waves, consider this final thought. Regardless of where you personally stand politically, his writings force us to ask a really difficult question. Is the change we see in the world around us genuine progress toward freedom, or is it simply a well-crafted illusion designed to keep a very, very old system running smoothly? It's absolutely a fascinating framework to ponder. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking those big questions.